Welcome to another Coffee with Samso. We're here today with Richard Brescianini from Heavy Rare Earths Limited. Code is HRE. We are back at the Crawley grounds here in UWA at the University Club. HRE has a market cap of 5.4 million at the moment. Share price is 9 cents. Richard, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Noel.
It's been a while. So, look, it's been a while since you spoke to us, and there's a few things that's happened since then. So, can you give us a quick update, and we can delve into each one as we go?
Yeah, it's several weeks, I think, since we last spoke.
I think last time we spoke, you were saying that the exploration target was coming out. Yeah.
So yeah, we you'll recall that. Put a mineral resource out there, 159 million tonnes at 870 parts per million total rare earths. We're very pleased with that result. And then within about 2 to 3 weeks of that, I actually thought it would be a bit shorter, but there was a lot of discussion between myself and our resource consultant about the exploration target. And anyway, so we eventually put it out there, and I can never remember the numbers because there's lots of numbers in there because you have ranges of tonnes and ranges of grade, but it's roughly at the bottom end about 300 million tonnes, at the top end about 1.4 billion tonnes. Bottom end of the range of total rare earths around 300 parts per million, up to a top end of about 1,400 parts per million. So it's all rubbery stuff, Noel. These exploration targets are pretty rubbery, but there is some science behind it, and hence the time taken to actually do it. I think it might have been a 2 to 3 week period where we really looked quite closely at around 45 to 46 holes that we drilled out in quite a distance away from our mineral resource, up to 14 kilometres away. So there's actually quite a bit of data to go off, but they were single lines of holes. We called it far field drilling from our mineral resource area. And really what we wanted to demonstrate with the exploration target is that the land position that we hold is at around 250 to 260 square kilometres of land, has the potential to host a substantial amount of rare earths in the ground. Now, of course, sitting in the ground is quite different to recoverable rare earths, but nevertheless, you've got to start somewhere. So the sorts of numbers that we're dealing with really tells investors that the ground is capable of hosting over 1 billion tonnes of in situ rare earths at potentially grades that are up around the grades that we have in our mineral resources. Now, there were 2 areas of the exploration target, and investors can go to our October release for the main map, and they'll see that there's a blue area that surrounds our red mineral resources, and then there's a pink cross-hatched area which is further away from our resource. They look like ribbons across the tenement. The blue area is the proportion of the exploration target, which in my view is much more deliverable in terms of conversion to mineral resources quickly. It's close to the mineral resource, and it really just requires some infill drilling to be able to turn that round into mineral resources. The other pink cross-hatched material, that's a little more difficult, but nevertheless straightforward because it just requires us to do some shallow drilling around where we've got drill holes out there at the moment. And again, I'll just restate, we're looking up to 14 kilometres away from our mineral resource. Now, the other thing that we really ought to mention is the proportion of our ground that the exploration target occupies. Total, around 44% of our total land position is our exploration target plus mineral resources. Okay? So still
that includes the ribbon area.
Includes the ribbon areas, the blue area on the map, and our mineral resources. Around 44 to 45% of our total land position. Of that, around 11%, so 11% of the 44, 45% are mineral resources. So, we have 55%, 56% still totally unaccounted for. God only knows what's sitting on that land. Okay, so that hasn't even been probed yet. We've got, 34, 33% in exploration target and 11% in mineral resources. That's really what it boils down to. So again, we got, 100 160 million tonnes in mineral resources, another up to 1.4 billion tonnes in exploration target, and that accounts for 45% of our land position, and unknown beyond that. So I think really we've delivered what we had hoped to deliver in terms of our mineral resource inventory, in terms of an exploration target we can begin to aim at, because ultimately to turn something like this into a development, you're going to need 1 billion plus tonnes of material sitting in the ground at the grades that we're dealing with. So I'm pretty pleased about where we've brought the project in that respect.
From an exploration point of view, and you mentioned that the numbers are fairly rubbery.
Yeah.
And we want to emphasise that you're not saying that it is there. You just
not mineral resources. Yeah.
Any geological issue that could reduce your expectation from your exploration target? Like, do you envisage that you're looking at I think in your announcement up to 1.3 billion tonnes?
Yeah.
Could something in there make it 300 million tonnes in terms of making the target smaller?
I'd be astounded if we were only at 300 million tonnes. Absolutely astounded. Looking at our intercepts, again up to 14 kilometres away from the mineral resource. The mineralisation is fairly continuous across the tenement. It does pinch and swell a little bit. The grade, of course, is variable. This is geology we're talking about. But to only build our resource position by another 150 million tonnes on what we've currently got, I would be gobsmacked if that's all the land position held. I would be gobsmacked.
Could it get bigger? I mean, what's the upside? We looked at the downside or potential unlikely downside. Could you be underestimating your potential there?
Well, quite possibly, because as I've said, our exploration target plus mineral resources accounts for 45% of our land position. Still another 55% to go where there's no pinpricks into it. So Lord only knows what's sitting out there, and it's going to require us to get a little smarter, to be perfectly honest, about how we might go targeting the rest of the tenement, because it is a big land position. We've been criticised a little bit for not having a large enough land position. I don't think that's the case, although I won't rule out acquiring more land in the district, because as I said, we're going to require, anyone will require plus 1 billion tonnes of material to potentially mine at 20 to 25 million tonnes per annum, feeding a plant at 10 million tonnes per annum. You're still looking at the potential for decades of production, which is a pretty good position to be in. So I won't rule out picking up more land across the district. That's always something that we're prepared to look at, as a risk mitigation as much as anything else. If our land doesn't hold what we think it does, there might be adjacent lands that do. So we won't ever not look at what's around us and potentially, commercial arrangements to achieve that. But, I'm pretty comfortable with our land position. I think it's pretty decent, and I think that we've demonstrated via both mineral resources and exploration target that we have a sufficient enough rare earths potentially to be able to be the foundation for a long-term development.
Speaking of other resources, I think you had your Duke results that you announced as well since the last time we spoke. Can you give us a rundown on that? Because that's a very interesting project.
It is an interesting project, and investors will recall that when we came to market with Cowalinya, and then we had this second project sitting in the portfolio, Duke, 50 kilometres northwest of Tennant Creek in the Northern Territory. There, our target is more a hard rock target in the basement rocks, associated with the basement rocks, where we have Tompkinson Creek beds, which are sandstones and conglomerates sitting unconformably over the top of Warrego granite, Proterozoic age Warrego granite, and Flynn Group metamorphics as well. So that unconformable contact is really our target area, and there are some similarities to the Browns Range area in Western Australia, okay, where the Browns Range, Northern Minerals Browns Range deposit is. And again, investors will recall that the reason why we are targeting that style of mineralisation is because of its heavy rare earth enrichment, particularly in dysprosium and terbium, which are in short supply around the world for all the reasons that most investors know about. So we're very keen on finding that as a target, but we also thought that there could be a secondary target type. The Warrego granite in the Tennant Creek area is enriched in rare earths. We've shown that in assay. We've put that out there in the market. And so we could conceivably have saprolite sitting over the top of Warrego granite that could also be enriched under the right circumstances. So our initial foray into the area was via a soil survey. We just wanted to find the lowest cost way of dealing with this. So we instigated a 470 sample soil survey, ultrafine soil survey, in August of this year. Completed that, got it in for assay, and the area that was covered was around 32 square kilometres. And a reminder for investors that when I talk about Cowalinya, 250 square kilometres, 45% of which is exploration target or mineral resources. Mineral resources accounts for 11%. 11% of 250 square kilometres is around 25 square kilometres, roughly. We covered an area of 32 square kilometres at Duke. So the same sort of area as what we already have mineral resources at Cowalinya. And what we found was some rare earth anomalism, substantial rare earth anomalism over a large proportion of that soil survey, including quite an intense area, about 7 square kilometres of intense rare earth anomalism in soils. Adjacent to that area, there was some drilling that was undertaken in 1979. We managed to access the drill chips from the saprolite and also some drill core from the basement rocks into Warrego granite through the Northern Territory Geological Survey. That was all preserved. They did a fantastic job in doing that. And we've come back with some substantial rare earth enrichment in saprolite in that old drilling, including around, from memory, 42 metres at nearly 800 parts per million total rare earths, another whole 24 metres at 820, 830 parts per million rare earths. So we have enrichment in saprolite above Warrego granite adjacent to where we've done our soil samples. And so therefore our best soil anomalies at this point in time have not been tested by any historic drilling or any drilling that we've done. We've done no drilling at all. So here we are sitting with an opportunity that's been generated out of a very low-cost soil sampling survey. We've generated drill targets that we can go out and drill sometime next year, and I'm delighted with the progress that we've shown in such a short period of time. So we haven't detected yet a Browns Range style anomaly in the basement, because we've only just sampled soils, but that's to come when we go out and drill those soil anomalies. And let's see what happens actually when we do pierce the basement and see if we see any heavy rare earth enrichment, potentially in xenotime, in the mineral xenotime, in the basement rocks, which again is associated with that unconformity that we're targeting. So there's still a couple of options there, but first and foremost, yeah, we have targets to aim at with a drill right from the word go, which is a great position to be in.
I say this project is interesting, Duke, your Duke project, for a few reasons. One is that obviously, you know, I speak to a lot of people in this rare earth sector recently, and coming off the rare earth conference in Canberra. The fact that you are so high up, and one of the common things people say is that every rare earth deposit is slightly different, unique in terms of its characteristics. And one of the things is that, you know, as you move into the tropics, the chemistry seems to be different.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, or are you thinking that maybe your rare earth there could be slightly different to even Cowalinya in terms of ability to extract? I mean, not trying to put words into your mouth, but this is kind of things that people postulate about, right?
Of course.
So do you think that could be the case, or would it be more related to your Browns Range kind of system?
Well, I guess the data will drive that. I mean, we've also got a little bit of extraction text work going on with the material that we've acquired through the old drilling. Okay, so not only do we have rare earths there, we're doing a little bit of test work to try and determine, okay, are these recoverable rare earths? To what extent are they recoverable? What reagents? So that's going on in the background to try and better inform ourselves as to what the real opportunity is there. It's fine to drill rare earths. It's quite another thing to start talking about, well, how's it recoverable and stuff. So that's still an ongoing crusade of ours, is to work that out for the Duke area. But at least we've got a start there that we detected rare earths. Whereas previously, of course, there were no rare earths there because nobody had ever bothered assaying for them. And ours is the first really time that's happened in the district. Now, how that's going to be different to Cowalinya, whether we in fact intersect any rare earths in future drilling that is of the Browns Range style, I mean, that is total speculation at this point in time. But whilst we're there,
that's what we do in this game.
That's what we do, and you can't generate things unless you're out there working. So we've done that very, very low cost at Duke, and as I say, I'm pleased that we've been able to generate drill targets from the get-go, because as you know, so easily you can go out and do these surveys and generate zip.
Yeah.
In which case you walk. Now we're fortunately not in that position at Duke.
I mean, when I look at what you guys, I mean, this all as we make it crystal clear.
Yeah.
Preliminary, and we're postulating.
Yeah.
When you start saying, oh, you got potential gold and copper and stuff, the chemistry must be different.
Yeah.
Therefore, hence the basket chemistry should be different.
Yep.
And that's where I'm coming from. When maybe could this mean that you're, assuming it's where we're trying to postulate is that it's more recoverable. But yeah, I mean, it's still early days, right?
Still early days, and at this point, on the negative side, I'm not seeing any enrichment in heavy rare earths specifically, but we've got a long way to go.
Yeah. And you picked up also Perenjori, big tenement there. What's the thinking behind that?
I grabbed hold of an old colleague of mine, Dr. Andy Wild, who is very, very well known in uranium exploration circles and gold exploration circles. An old colleague of mine from BHP days, very good, exceptional geologist, exceptional exploration geologist, exceptional researcher. He and I got together late last year and started talking about how we might apply some of his experience in the uranium sector to rare earths. And we came up with a model that is paleochannel related. And he undertook a study for us over the summer period last year, delivered a report to us, and we've acted on that report by picking up 2 projects in the Midwest region, Perenjori being one, Merino being another. They're both within around 220 kilometres of Geraldton, in reasonable infrastructure areas. Both projects are paleochannel related. As you know, there are paleochannels all over Western Australia, South Australia, Northern Territory. These are sitting over the top of Archean granitoids. That was another requirement for them to sit over the top of Archean granitoids that potentially are enriched in rare earth elements. So we made use of publicly available data sets, Geoscience Australia, GSWA, to look at the enrichment of granites across Western Australia and elsewhere in rare earths. And those 2 areas figured prominently in the study. So one, we had to wait for ground to be freed up, but the other was totally open. So we've picked up those projects. We've done a quick recce visit in the last couple of weeks to both project areas, both Andy and I, and I'm pleased to say that access is very, very straightforward in terms of being able to get around the project areas. And as you know, Noel, it's always a bonus to have reasonable access around an area you can physically get around. And so we encountered very, very few, if any, barriers to being able to access those areas. At Merino, we're looking at 2 pastoral leases, and it's a cattle country up through there. Used to be sheep country. It's quite close to Yalgoo. At Perenjori, it's quite close to the township of Perenjori. There, we're looking at some unincorporated Crown land, some general purpose lease, and also some private land. So there's a mixture of land types there that we'll manage over time, and we're looking at the possibility of some soil work over both project areas. Again, low cost, possibly some passive seismic to be able to better bracket the location of the paleo channels, and we go from there. So again, neither area has been explored for rare earths previously. We'll see how that goes next year.
Because that area is not too far off from Venture Minerals project, where they've recently announced quite a decent intercept and grade. I think one of them up to 7,000 ppm. So, I mean, who knows, right? Who knows what's in store? It's still early days, right?
Well, we've just set foot on the ground, have a look around, and as I say, certainly tick the first box. We also were able to visit a few landowners whilst we're there, of course, and it's always important to be able to get off on the right foot with the local landowners, let them know exactly what you're up to the extent that you can, because some of it's you're guided by what you find as you go along. So we've given them a little bit of a plan and try to put them at ease that we're not suddenly going to be digging up a lot of land and stuff. It just doesn't work like that. It'll be a long process, and we'll start without really doing too much in terms of ground disturbing type activity, and hopefully be able to aim a drill not too long after we potentially generate some anomalies that we can aim a drill at.
The exploration rare earths is a bit like the same journey as the exploration of lithium, because lithium was what we kind of stumbled over the pegmatites, and I think we're still learning. I mean, what you have at Cowalinya in Esperance is one type, then suddenly we got the AR3 popped up, and then Indiana's got stuff in the South Australia, and then Venture, and who knows what's in store, right?
We don't, and you'll have seen from the Canberra conference that you went to recently. I wasn't at it. I was in the field at Merino and Perenjori that week. You'll have seen that there's a lot of people beginning to work in the clay-hosted space. People are researching this right now, and really previous to that, previous to the last 12 months, no one was researching it, to be perfectly honest. I mean, there were just these oddball things that were happening in China over many, many years, where most of the world's heavy rare earths come from. Other projects started to sort of pop up occasionally. Madagascar was one historically that was there 10 years ago. A couple sort of floating around Brazil, maybe one in Chile. People just weren't working on them. And now you're starting to get some smart people in the research space, in exploration, working on these things. We'll learn a lot over the next couple of years, but there's got to be sustained effort. Okay, so that's the key. Sustained effort in an area of research that helps inform explorers to go out and lower the risk, do more work, generate more data. It can be a bit of a slow burn. I know investors probably look at it and say, well, that's all great, but we don't want to wait for that. But, that's the nature of the game when you're looking at a completely new style of mineralisation that has huge potential in a country like Australia that can do things properly when it relates to the way in which we mine, the way in which we rehabilitate, and all of those sorts of things that Australia is well known for.
And I think one of the takeaways, I had a lot of takeaways from the conference, but there was conversation that maybe the so-called ionic stuff coming out of China is not really what it seems. The chemistry might be different in how they report certain things. So, that research you talk about with the clay host, we're probably closer in the curve to try and figure it out than we were 2 years ago, significantly, because the amount of interest and money pumped into it is it's mind blowing, and what money is in the States that are being pushed to this sector is definitely mind blowing. So, I think that curve is going to be much will allow us to be closer to a solution than not.
I would expect so, and You know, we talk about the Chinese deposits, right? Can we stop talking about the Chinese deposits? The reason why I'd like to stop talking about them is that we know that in southern China, they've been exploiting iron adsorption clays for many, many years as the world's primary source of heavy rare earths, terbium and dysprosium. Okay? Now, a lot of effort is going on in Myanmar, Laos, for similar types of deposits, Vietnam, northern Vietnam. They're all under Chinese control, generally speaking. They're disasters. Let's be honest. They are disasters in terms of the way in which they've been exploited over the years. I'm sure that the Chinese government is trying to do a better job in southern China. Let's stop talking about them, because in Australia, we would not do it that way. We cannot do it that way. It's unacceptable to exploit deposits like that in that way.
I think in most places.
Probably in most places, okay? So we should just stop talking about them and say, look, that's what they do. There are problems in supply, not just because of environmental reasons. We know the Chinese government has actually shut down a lot of that supply. And then we've got the whole geopolitics around, or at least the military control over certain parts of Myanmar, which begins to compromise the amount of rare earths coming into China, okay, which are traded out through China. So it's a really, really fraught area that we really shouldn't point to and say, oh, that's the model. In no way is that the model, except potentially scientifically. So let's just stop talking about it and just get on and do what we need to do to be able to bring forward what I just call clay-hosted deposits. It's in saprolite for ourselves at Cowalinya. Lord only knows exactly what it's sitting in at Duke at this point in time. It looks like saprolite, but nonetheless. And just look at them as they present themselves and try and find the best way to bring them forward economically. And in each case, they're going to be slightly different to one another. They won't be like the Chinese case.
I think one of the biggest takeaways, I must say that conference, credit to the guys who organised it. I sat there diligently for the 3 days and through the workshop and every talk. It was really informed. Maybe because I was there to try and absorb, get as much sponge, like a sponge in some ways. Is that going in there, you're thinking, well, what's the potential of the rare sector? Going out of that, I'm thinking, they're talking about you need 35 times more, etc. Whatever that number is, as you say, whatever that number is, it's more. Which is, if you take that meaning, then irrespective of where it is, the geopolitical issue, China, non-China, China being friendly again, I think to me the view for the future of rare earth is a reality now. It's set. The question is, when you start to mine, what is the price? What's the demand? Are we going to say that that the use for permanent magnets is no longer what we need? We need something else. But I think that's probably more fantasy than not. But I think going away, I'm thinking, yes, the reality is there, is set, and the money is there. The creating of the second supply chain, given another couple of years, 3 years, is going to be most likely there. Then that means that it's almost a free market. I don't know. What do you think of my thinking?
Look, separate supply chains. Look, if there are separate supply chains for other commodities, please tell me about them. One commodity, two supply chains. I just don't think things kind of work like that. How the concentration of the rare earths supply chain on China, as it currently stands today, is going to play out over time as people outside of China try and de-risk their supply chains, because it's never good to have concentrated supply chains on one country. To be perfectly honest, whether that country is Australia or any other country for that matter. Other people will look at us and probably say, well, what's the iron ore supply chain look like? It's pretty heavily concentrated in Australia. Maybe not such a great thing. We think it's a great thing, but others may not think so. So I just think that will work out over time. I would like to see more capacity capacity built for rare earth permanent magnets outside of China. I think that would be a good thing.
The downstream side of
Absolutely, because that's what will drive, right? I mean, that's the final product where your rare earths are going into, insofar as magnets are concerned, right? Your rare earth permanent magnets for ND and PR, TBDY. That's where most of the demand driver is into rare earth permanent magnets for all of the things that we know about. So I think we'd all like to see some opening up of the supply chain as it relates to rare earth permanent magnets. If that were to happen, then you'll probably find greater upstream build out of capacity from mining all the way through to the production of metal. But it really starts with a magnet, So at the moment, it's 90 to 95% concentrated in China, rare earth permanent magnets. And remember, all your automakers are buying magnets from China today. They're very, very happy with the product and they think it's at a great price. So, the rest of the world has got to sort of pick up the pace and say, well, we've not only got to build capacity, we've got to actually build capacity and be competitive with Chinese magnets. That's what they've got to do. So they've got to find ways to do that. Smarter people than you and I will work that out over time. We would like to see that happen, to be able to build out the supply chain upstream from there. I don't think it'll happen the other way around. I think it must happen in that way. Okay? Will that happen?
Do the downstream side.
Starting with the building magnet capacity and then taking in more supply from non-Chinese sources. If the demand grows as we expect it to in all sorts of metals for the electric revolution in power and transport and so on, I don't know where all the metal's going to come from. I mean, it just seems just astounding, the sorts of numbers that people are talking about in copper and nickel and lithium and, and rare earths and so on. It's really hard to tell whether that demand is going to be there or not. It's probably not going as fast as the demand growth is probably not going as fast as what people had expected. But I think it will still be there, just might take a little bit longer for it to happen. But the world has got to figure out, when it comes to our little sector, how do you build more permanent magnet capacity outside of China? That's really what the world's got to figure out. And until that happens, there's going to be some constraints on the upstream supply, I suspect. All right?
It's a bit like the lithium side too, right? It's the bottleneck's not in the supply, the upstream. The bottleneck's in the downstream. And I look, the thing I took away is, when I say that's my belief, I'm not professing that the rare sector is here to stay in terms of long term, is that if there's so much demand for this, let's just say, whether it comes in 5 years or 10 years, there's no geopolitical issue anymore, because the Chinese will be saying, I need more of this. And maybe the bottleneck is how many permanent mags you put out,
Yeah, well, China will probably remain, the greatest demand will remain from China. All right? Might grow in India, places like that. Don't know. We'll kind of see what happens there or other places in the world. But, China will still really account for the largest proportion of demand, I would expect, because, more things are being built, more electric cars are being built there, so on and so forth, right? That's not going to stop in a hurry. I don't think that will stop in a hurry.
No, I agree.
So we've got to always keep an eye on that'll probably account for the greatest demand, but demand has really got to grow outside of China, and the capacity to build magnets has got to start happening outside of China if the world wants to de-risk that supply chain in being too concentrated on China. Okay? Now, cross out China and put someone else there if you wanted to in other metals. I think it's always a good thing to see these supply chains de-risked. We don't have to go back very far to COVID to find out how vulnerable all sorts of supply chains were. And it's not a good place for us to be. So
it's
hopefully,
not a good place for everybody.
No, of course not. So I just think, yes, there is certainly a focus on China and the vulnerability around relying on it. I understand that. I think we all understand that. I would like to see further capacity grow outside of China, but that means there's got to be greater demand outside of China as well. Okay? And I've just said, most of the demand is probably going to remain in China. Probably most of the growth will be in China as well. So, the world's got to pick up at some point in time. I'm not sure how they do that, but that's got to happen for us to be able to see a lot more capacity open up upstream, projects like ours and others, to be able to feed that demand, because the demand will grow. The question is, how quickly will it grow, and where is the demand growth going to be coming from?
I think in summary, it'll grow. The downstream side, that whole process, which is very complicated, that will happen. It was with great difficulty, but I think from what I'm hearing, because hearing and what happens, as we all know, could be poles apart.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing is that the money is there to help that happen, but with great difficulty and over time. But let's focus back on.
Well, there's no shortage of money around, as we've been talking even off camera. There's no shortage of money around. The question is, where is it going to be directed? And, in the rare earths game, I think we've probably got to do a better job of explaining to investors that, patient capital is required, because these are not quick projects. All you have to do is look back and see how many projects have come online, upstream projects we're talking here, have come online in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
It'll be less than one hand.
Less than one hand.
Okay. So these things aren't fast. There is some geopolitics in there, and it just becomes more and more complicated the more politicians get involved. And we, heavy rare earths, many others who are in the sector, have got to find ways to be as cost efficient as possible in our exploitation of these resources, mining and, most importantly, processing. So we will probably need some help from governments to be able to achieve those aims. And they are already beginning to work in that game via the provision of low-cost loans, other grants, and so on. So, governments are starting to do work in that area as it relates to critical minerals, and it's pleasing to see, because go back 10 years and none of that was going on, aside from the government of Japan, who helped fund the Lynas development.
Go back 2 years. I remember talking to Northern Minerals, and he was talking to a brick wall. But so we come fast.
Yes,
and far.
Yep.
So I think that's the good part about what I've learned over the 2 years. We're all experts within 2 years, right? So,
but we at HRE, just to absolutely be crystal clear about it, our aim is to bring forward a development with the lowest operating costs as possible. That's what we're aiming to do, because you've got to remain competitive. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that leads to my next question was, so we all know that you guys want to monetize a business.
Yes.
So what is the immediate goal for you guys? Like, what are the immediate steps that you need to do to demonstrate to the market, to some degree, how you move forward, right? Yep. Can you just give us that?
I can. Two sides of the business. First side of the business is, what do we have in the ground? Is the potential there to be able to bring forward to be able to be the foundation for a development? I think we've done enough at this point in time to bring forward inferred resources, albeit inferred, and an exploration target that begins to demonstrate that the project has certain capacity, okay, in terms of an inventory of rare earths sitting in the ground on the land position that we have. We'll put that one aside now. The other side of the business, the other 50% of the business is in the recovery of rare earths in metallurgy. So we've brought forward already statements around where the rare earths are hosted, what size fractions, how much of it's hosted there. 80+% of our magnet rare earths in the sub 25 micron size fraction. Can we recover them? Yes, with simple screening. What happens next? We go into an acid leach. For us, it's hydrochloric acid leach is the most efficient to keep the highest amount of recovery of rare earths at acid consumptions where we're still in the game. Okay, so that's another 82% or something on average coming into solution, our magnet rare earths, and we're consuming 18 kilograms per tonne of fines in the process of hydrochloric acid. So we've gotten to that point, okay? Next steps for us, which are currently going on and we're in the latter stages of, is the impurity removal steps to be able to produce something that we can sell. So that's the key. The key is to be able to demonstrate that you can produce something out of your ground that can be sold. The first point in the rare earth supply chain for a project like ours, for a clay-hosted project, is a mixed rare earth carbonate. So we're in the latter stages of that right now. We'll only produce several grams of it in this first run, by the way. We're not going to be producing tons of it because we only start with 10 litres of liquor to be able to produce something at the end of it. So we're only looking at producing several grams, but it'll essentially be a proof of concept. The most important thing is that it's produced to spec, and we'll have a fairly good idea of what the spec's got to be able to sell it, because I've got Gavin Beer, a very, very experienced metallurgist who's been travelling the rare earths game for as long as I have, 15 plus years. So he knows what the specs really need to be, European type specs, not Chinese specs, European type specs. So he'll know that. So we're aiming to reach a spec that is known, which demonstrates to the market that it's a product that can be marketed, okay? Not only that, you're going to have to be able to demonstrate that you're using only the minimum amount of reagents to be able to achieve that, okay, in your impurity removal and precipitation steps. So for us, we're looking at lime and sodium hydroxide in the impurity removal steps, okay, so lime and caustic. Both work well. We haven't published any of this. This is just part of the ongoing process development. Both work well. Caustic works a little bit better. But we certainly won't leave lime behind because it's a much cheaper reagent. So that step is done. We're now into the precipitation step. So that's coming very, very shortly. I can't tell you exactly when that'll be, but very, very shortly. I'm very happy with the way that process has gone.
Before Santa Claus?
Look, we might have produced carbonate before then, but we won't have assays for it. That's the caveat I'll put on it at this point in time, right? So we'll have produced something, but you'll be able to tell from the colour of it as to how pure it is. Okay, you'll be able to tell that. So that's the first thing I'll say. The next thing is, okay, you can produce a rare earth carbonate, let's say, and you can produce it to spec, and you're not bankrupting yourself in the process using too much reagents. Yep. The next question will be well, how can that be applied across your entire project area? Because to produce that rare earth carbonate, we'll be using a blend of 4 composites. That's not a huge amount of material and not representative of your entire ore deposit, okay? So we're at the same time, we're doing a large variability program where we're using 63 composites. We previously used 13, of which 8 were plant feed. We determined were plant feed as having both high recoveries of rare earths, low consumption of reagents to be able to qualify as plant feed. So we're now going to 63 of them across the deposit, and people can go to our quarterly to take a look at exactly where those composites are. I think they're in gold crosses from memory. So that's going to tell us, okay, well, how well can we apply our metallurgical scheme from sizing all the way through to leaching across our deposit? How much material is potentially available for us in a process sense? So that's going to give us some more information, and I'm hopeful that we'll have that certainly in the first quarter of next year. That second bit of data. But yeah, production of rare earth carbonate to demonstrate that something that can be sold out of material from Cowalinya is something that I'm prepared to take to refiners and to other potential project partners around the world and say, we've got a large amount of rare earth sitting in the ground. We've determined that we can produce something that can be sold. We're not bankrupting ourselves in the process. What type of discussions that could lead to? Well, I can leave that to investors' imagination.
Okay. I mean, that's quite a good lead into, the typical news flow. Like, what is your news flow? But before we go there, a lot of people out there thinking, okay, look, we've had a lot of discussion in terms of the rare earth market and what our thoughts are and the future demand and everything else. Could you think of, the devil's advocate question as to what could actually, throw a spanner in the works, and all this hard work and all this forward planning that we've discussed would be to no avail.
Look, a couple of things could happen, of course. Rare earth prices drop away to half of where they are today. NdPr prices are currently at $68, $70 a kilo. You find yourself in the $30 range. Well, no one's going to make money at that, right?
Well,
so that kind of destroys your whole project. Yeah, no windmills. I'm sure there'll still be windmills produced, but none of the upstream guys are going to make any money. So that's a situation that could emerge. Very, very unlikely, nonetheless. Look, for us, what we can control is we consume reagents. Our consumption rates for our reagents to produce final product is too high. So it puts us out of the game in terms of project economics. That could happen still. Okay? I'm not foreshadowing that in any way, shape or form. We've got to get the data first to be able to even come to a conclusion, because really for us, the next steps beyond the production of carbonate, demonstrating that there's enough of material sitting in the ground for us to be able to feed through our chosen process route. The next steps really are to begin to look at the project economics around it, maybe a scoping study or something like that. But, I don't want to foreshadow that too much either, because, again, we need to ensure that the work that we're doing will at least provide the basis for a scoping study. We just don't know that yet, okay? So that could happen, that we find, we really don't have the makings of a project here. Do I think that's going to happen? No, I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're seeing enough positives in the work that we're doing that indicates to me that's not likely to present as a dead end to us. Mentioned earlier, we potentially could look at building our land position in the district. If we build our land position in the district, it can give investors a lot of confidence that we think that we're onto something. We wouldn't be throwing money at that type of pursuit unless we felt that there was a genuine opportunity there, okay? And of course, we're always on the lookout for other projects, rare earth projects. We're remaining very, very focused on rare earths. So investors can be assured of that we're not going to be distracted away from what I consider to be a pretty robust sector and will remain robust for quite some time to come.
Okay. I don't know whether we can add to this question. You kind of answered it a bit, but what should investors out there be watching, if they're hopeful for HRE, what should they be looking for to make them feel like, I want to take a position now? What could be that thing you think that missing link that could help investors decide?
Hell no, we're a $5 million, $6 million market cap company. When you take a look at what could be, all right, so we're going many, many leaps ahead here, okay, what could be. If we put round figures at the sorts of recovery rates we're talking about for our project that we've demonstrated so far, if we look at putting 10 to 15 million tonnes of fines through a plant, at the grades that we're talking about recoveries, we're looking at producing somewhere around 2,500 to 3,000 tonnes per annum of NdPr oxide equivalent in a mixed rare earth carbonate. At current prices of around about $70 US a kilo for NdPr oxide, and that's not counting any money that you'll get for anything else there. By the way, the only other revenues you'll get is for terbium and dysprosium. But even if you net that to zero and only focused on the NdPr, which is probably a conservative way to go, you're looking at $200 to $250 million per annum, US dollars per annum of revenue. We're a 5 million market cap company. So I think the opportunity is there right now for investors to take a close look at us. We've got a lot of rare earths sitting in inventory, sitting in the ground in resources alone, potentially more to come via our exploration target. We may even build a land position in the district. We'll see how that goes, okay? And we're fast approaching the point of being able to produce sample of product, which I'm hopeful will be to spec, because otherwise, If it's not to spec, it's not a product, okay? So I think there's plenty for investors to get excited about right now about heavy rare earths, with a couple of other projects sitting out there as, potential opportunities. Duke, Perenjori Merino, very early stage stuff, but nonetheless, I ask investors to continue to focus on Cowalinya because that's where we've made the most gains and in 15 short months, and plenty more to come. Plenty more to come.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm quietly on the borderline before going to the conference. Coming out, I think it gave me a real perspective of what could be, and you've been in this for a lot longer, so your thoughts and things are probably much more advanced than myself. But I do agree. I think there is definitely patient money, patient time. It's not going to happen short term, but I think it will happen. And those that hang around and do the things they need and have the ability to do the things that need will reap the benefits, I think. That's my view.
Yeah, look, I think that, our shareholders have shown some patience. A lot of our foundation holders, they're in there still. They like the sector. They understand it's patient capital. They're not complaining. They have every right to complain. I mean, we listed at 20, we're currently at 9. Every right to complain. I don't see complaints because they're pretty focused on what the longer term benefits could be, the longer term returns. And again, I come back to the potential revenues that are involved if we can maintain the recovery rates and keep it at very, very low costs. They're the sorts of dollars that we're talking about in an industry that Australia wants to do better in. They want to do better in. The governments are telling us that, so there's every reason to think that we're going to have a lot of support to be able to maintain the focus on rare earths for quite some time to come. But patient capital will be absolutely fundamental to it, and I thank our shareholders for being patient with us, although in my own defence, it's only been 15 months, and it's been a whirlwind 15 months. We've achieved a lot. So a lot more to come in the not too distant future.
Okay, great place to end. Thank you. Again, you're in all hands, so you know all about the coffees. And till next time, I hope we keep following your story and we'll talk again.
Thanks, Noel. And by the way, my wife just this morning said, "Are you bringing coffee home?" I said, "I think I might be." And she said, "I'm going to be making a tiramisu for Christmas. Guess where that coffee's going to go?" I said, "Perfect." So thanks very much to Kit.
All right, thank you, and till next time.
All right, cheers then.